Have you ever had that strange, unsettling feeling that you're somehow different from everyone around you? Not in an obvious way that others can easily see and name, but in some fundamental, hard-to-articulate way that colors your entire experience of life. Perhaps you found yourself nodding along in conversations while thinking, "They're speaking words I understand," but somehow we're not talking about the same thing at all. Maybe you've learned to carefully filter what you share, keeping your deepest thoughts and perceptions to yourself, because the few times you've tried to express them, you've been met with blank stares, nervous laughter, or concerned looks. Or perhaps you've spent years trying to fit in, to be normal, only to find that the harder you try, the more exhausted you become, and the more painfully aware you are of the gap between your inner reality and the shared reality that everyone else seems to inhabit so effortlessly. What if I told you that this feeling of fundamental difference isn't something wrong with you that needs to be fixed? What if it's not a deficiency or a pathology, but a different mode of perception, a different way of processing reality that the majority simply doesn't share or recognize? If you enjoy this type of deep reflection, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And most importantly, leave a comment below telling us if this has ever happened to you, or if you know someone who passed through this. You see, we have this cultural myth that beneath surface differences, all humans basically experience reality in the same way. We assume that my perception of red is the same as yours, that my experience of emotion is fundamentally similar to yours, that we're all operating with the same basic set of assumptions about what matters and how the world works. And this myth is reinforced everywhere, in our education system, in our media, in our casual conversations. It's so pervasive that we rarely even notice it. It's the water we swim in. But what if this isn't actually true? What if there are profound, fundamental differences in how people perceive, process, and relate to reality? And what if these differences aren't evenly distributed? What if most people cluster around a certain range of perception and processing, what we might call normal, while others exist in a different mode entirely? This wouldn't be about being better or worse, superior or inferior. It would simply be about being fundamentally different in ways that make complete mutual understanding impossible. The first reason normal people will never fully understand you is that they live primarily on the surface of life, while you experience its depths. This isn't a judgment about depth of character or intelligence. It's about where attention naturally goes, about what registers as significant in consciousness. Most people are calibrated to notice and prioritize the concrete, the practical, the socially relevant aspects of experience. They're tracking the explicit content of conversations, the visible actions and reactions of others, the tangible outcomes of their choices. But if you're someone who's wired differently, your attention naturally extends to the subtext beneath the text, the currents beneath the surface, the patterns behind the particulars. You might find yourself constantly aware of the unspoken emotional dynamics in a room, the subtle contradictions in what someone is saying, the underlying assumptions that no one is questioning. You might sense the deeper significance of events that others dismiss as random or meaningless. You might perceive connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena that others can't see at all. I remember speaking with a woman, let's call her Eliza, who described going through life feeling like she was watching a different movie than everyone else. People will be discussing what the characters are saying and doing, she told me, while I'm noticing the symbolism, the lighting, the camera angles, the music, the themes, all these layers that seem so obvious and significant to me, but that no one else even seems to register. And when I try to point these things out, they look at me like I'm overthinking or making things up. But I'm not adding anything. I'm just describing what I actually perceive. This difference in perceptual mode isn't something you can simply explain to someone who doesn't share it. It's not like teaching someone a new concept or presenting them with new information. It's a fundamental difference in how reality registers in consciousness. You can describe what you perceive, but you can't transfer the perception itself. It would be like trying to explain color to someone who has been colorblind from birth. They might understand it intellectually, but they can't experience it directly. The second reason normal people will never fully understand you is that they take consensus reality at face value, while you instinctively see through it. Again, this isn't about intelligence or even skepticism. It's about a natural orientation toward the constructed nature of what we call reality. Most people operate within the agreed-upon frameworks of society. Its rules, roles, institutions, narratives, taking them as given, as just how things are. They might question specific aspects of these frameworks, but they don't question the frameworks themselves. But if you're wired differently, you might have a persistent sense that much of what passes for reality is actually a kind of collective agreement, a shared fiction that could be otherwise. You might find yourself constantly aware of the arbitrariness of social norms, the constructed nature of categories we treat as natural, the way language shapes rather than merely reflects our perception. You might instinctively look beyond official narratives to the power structures maintaining them, beyond cultural practices to the unexamined beliefs underlying them. I once spoke with a man who described having this orientation from earliest childhood. I remember being in kindergarten, he told me, and suddenly realizing that all the rules about standing in line and raising your hand and asking permission to use the bathroom weren't natural laws like gravity. They were just things adults had made up, and everyone was pretending they were somehow necessary or inevitable. I looked around at the other kids dutifully following along, and I felt this dizzying sense of being in on some secret that no one else could see. Why couldn't they see it? It seemed so obvious. This orientation toward consensus reality isn't something you choose. It's more like a perceptual filter you can't switch off. You see the constructed, contingent nature of social reality, not because you're trying to be difficult or contrary, but because that's simply how it registers in your consciousness. And this creates a fundamental gap in understanding, because most people experience social constructs as solid, given, real in a way that you simply don't and can't. The third reason normal people will never fully understand you is that they seek comfort and belonging while you are driven by truth and authenticity. This difference in core motivation shapes almost every aspect of how you move through the world. Most people, consciously or unconsciously, make choices that maximize social comfort and minimize conflict or exclusion. They adapt their views to fit the groups they want to belong to. They filter their speech to align with what's acceptable in their social context. They gravitate toward ideas and identities that bring connection rather than isolation. This orientation isn't shallow or cowardly. It's deeply human and has profound evolutionary roots. We are social creatures, and for most of human history, being excluded from the group meant literal death. But if you're wired differently, you may find that your primary loyalty isn't to comfort or belonging, but to truth as you perceive it, to authentic expression, to integrity between your inner and outer reality. This doesn't mean you don't value connection or community. It means that when forced to choose between belonging and authenticity, you find yourself constitutionally unable to choose belonging at the cost of deep self-betrayal. I remember a conversation with a woman in her 50s who had spent decades trying to adapt herself to conventional social expectations. She'd taken jobs that depleted her, maintained relationships that diminished her, expressed views that weren't her own, all in pursuit of the belonging she thought she was supposed to want. And then one day, she told me, I realized that even if I achieved perfect belonging, it wouldn't matter because the person being included wouldn't actually be me. It would be this carefully constructed persona that I'd created to be acceptable. The real me would still be excluded, just by a different mechanism. This difference in orientation creates an unbridgeable gap in understanding, because most people simply cannot fathom prioritizing truth or authenticity over belonging. It seems unnecessary, even self-destructive from their perspective. They might admire it in the abstract or in movies, but they find it bewildering and sometimes threatening in practice. And so they may try to help you by encouraging you to compromise more, to be more strategic, to care more about how you're perceived, not realizing that for you, these well-intentioned suggestions feel like being asked to cut out your own heart. The fourth reason normal people will never fully understand you is that they are seeking answers while you are drawn to mystery. This difference in relationship to the unknown shapes how you think, how you approach problems, how you make meaning of your experiences. Most people are uncomfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty. They want clear explanations, definitive answers, reliable predictions. They gravitate towards systems of thought that offer certainty, whether religious, scientific, political, or cultural. They want to feel that they understand how things work and what will happen next. But if you're wired differently, you might find yourself not merely tolerating mystery and uncertainty, but actively drawn to it, even nourished by it. You might be more interested in questions than answers, more engaged by exploration than conclusion, more alive in the spaces between established categories than within them. You might instinctively mistrust certainty, not out of contrarianism, but because you directly perceive the complexity and flux of reality in a way that makes absolute claims seem naive or incomplete. I once spoke with a man who described his orientation this way. When most people encounter a mystery, they want to solve it so they can file it away and move on. But for me, the mystery itself is where the aliveness is. When I find an answer, it's satisfying for a moment, but then something dies, the wonder fades. So I'm not actually looking for answers in the way other people seem to be. I'm looking for better questions, deeper mysteries, more expansive unknowns. This orientation toward mystery creates a fundamental incompatibility in how you and normal people approach meaning-making. They may find your comfort with ambiguity frustrating or even threatening, as if you're deliberately withholding clarity that could be achieved if only you tried harder or thought more rigorously. They may interpret your nuanced, provisional thinking as wishy-washy or uncommitted. They may grow impatient with your willingness to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without collapsing them into a single conclusion. These four fundamental differences, living at depth versus on the surface, seeing through consensus reality versus taking it at face value, prioritizing truth over belonging, and being drawn to mystery rather than answers, aren't superficial preferences or habits. They're more like different operating systems, different modes of consciousness, and they create a gap in understanding that can't be bridged through better communication or more effort. It's not that normal people won't understand you, it's that in a very real sense, they can't, because they're perceiving and processing reality in a fundamentally different way. So what does this mean for you if you recognize yourself in this description? First, it means that the sense of fundamental difference you felt isn't imaginary or pathological. It's a valid recognition of an actual gap in perception and processing. You're not broken. You're not failing at something that should come naturally. You're experiencing the inevitable result of moving through the world with a different kind of consciousness than the majority. Second, it means that the exhaustion you may feel from trying to translate yourself to others is real and legitimate. It's not that you're not trying hard enough or explaining well enough. It's that you're attempting something that is, in a fundamental sense, impossible, like trying to describe color to someone who cannot perceive it. This doesn't mean you should stop trying to communicate or connect. It means you can release the expectation that if you just find the right words, the gap will disappear. It won't, and that's no one's fault. Third, it means that finding your people becomes incredibly important. While normal people may never fully understand you, there are others who share your mode of perception and processing, who instinctively get what you're talking about without elaborate explanation, who resonate with your way of moving through the world. These connections are precious precisely because they're rare. They allow you to exhale, to relax the constant internal translation, to experience the profound relief of being seen and understood without having to justify your basic perception of reality. I've witnessed these connections, and they're remarkable to observe. Two people who have spent their lives feeling fundamentally misunderstood, suddenly recognizing each other, like travelers from the same distant country meeting in a foreign land. The relief, the joy, the sense of homecoming is palpable. As one woman described it to me, it was like I'd been speaking a language no one else knew my entire life, and suddenly I met someone who was fluent. I didn't have to translate, I didn't have to justify. I could just speak and they understood not just my words, but the whole world of meaning behind them. Fourth, it means that there's a unique value in your different mode of perception. The fact that you naturally perceive layers, patterns, and connections that others don't means you have access to insights and understandings that might not emerge any other way. The fact that you see through consensus reality allows you to question assumptions that need questioning, to imagine alternatives that need imagining. Your prioritization of truth over comfort enables you to speak necessary truths that others might shy away from. Your orientation toward mystery allows you to remain open to possibilities that more certainty-seeking minds might prematurely exclude. This doesn't make you better than normal people. Different modes of perception and processing each have their values and their limitations, but it does mean that your difference isn't merely a source of difficulty or alienation. It's also a unique gift, a particular kind of vision that the world needs, even if it doesn't always know it or acknowledge it. Some of humanity's most profound insights and creations have come from those who perceived reality differently than the majority, who saw patterns others missed, who questioned what others took for granted, who pursued truth at the cost of comfort, who stayed with mystery when others rushed to premature certainty. Finally, it means that integration rather than assimilation is the path forward. For many who perceive differently, there's a painful period of trying to become normal, to experience reality the way others seem to fit in at any cost. When this inevitably fails, there can be a swing to the opposite extreme, rejecting the normal world entirely, dismissing those who don't share your perception, isolating yourself in your difference. But neither approach brings wholeness or peace. The more generative path is one of integration, accepting your different mode of perception as valid and valuable, while also recognizing its limitations. Learning to translate between your experience and others, even while accepting that the translation will always be incomplete. Finding ways to contribute your unique perspective, while also respecting the value of other ways of perceiving and processing. Building bridges where possible, while honoring the gaps where they exist. This isn't an easy path. It requires a kind of bilingualism, a capacity to move between different realities without losing your center. It requires discernment about when to try to translate your perception and when to simply honor it in silence. It requires finding the balance between authentic expression and effective communication. It requires accepting that complete understanding may be impossible while still seeking moments of genuine connection across the divide. But this integration, challenging as it is, allows something remarkable to emerge. A life where your different perception becomes not just a source of alienation, but a source of contribution. Where your natural orientation toward depth, your instinctive seeing through of consensus reality, your commitment to truth over comfort, your attraction to mystery, all become not burdens to overcome, but gifts to offer, in whatever way is yours to give. So if you've always felt that normal people would never understand you, know this: you're right, and that's okay. The gap in understanding is real, and it's not your fault or failing. But also know that you're not alone in your different mode of perception. There are others who share it, who will recognize and value your way of seeing without requiring exhaustive justification or explanation. And know that your different perception, while it may never be fully understood by the majority, has unique value in a world that desperately needs multiple ways of seeing and knowing. Your task is not to become normal, an impossible and soul-destroying endeavor, but to become fully, authentically yourself, offering your unique vision in whatever way you can.